of people ask me, hey Anna, I'm stuck at this rating. What can I do to improve? Well, today I'm going to be focusing on every single one of you that is rated under 800 to tell you exactly what it is that you need to do to improve and gain rating. I'll be playing two 5+5 blitz games where I'm playing against people in this rating range, and I'll be talking you through my thought process and what mistakes my opponents are doing so that you can spot them in your games. So I'll go ahead and start the first game. I typically don't recommend people playing blitz games in this rating group. I think it's better to play 10 or 15-minute rapid games, as it gives you a lot more time to think. And I think that's better when you try to improve. But for the sake of the video, I'll play a little bit faster games. So I'm starting with d4. You always want to start with your central pawns at this range, I believe, because you'll be a lot easier holding control of these four most important squares of the board. So you want to start with your central pawns, and after that, you want to bring your knights out, and then your bishops, and then castle. Why? Because you want to develop as quickly as possible so that you can use all your pieces for the rest of the game. Now, you don't want to bring out your queen early on, because if you do so, then you'll very, very, very easily be attacked, and the queen will be very vulnerable. And because it's your best piece, you want to leave it out. I was about to pre-move. That's another thing to not do. Do not pre-move, guys. Yeah, you don't want to bring it out early on. So now my opponent is attacking this pawn. Well, it is defended by the queen, but because we want to bring our pieces out, I'll go ahead and bring my knights out and develop them. And like I said, we want to do that towards the center. We don't want to have the knights on the rim, because there's a saying that is the knights on the rim are grim, and it's because the knights on the rim, so on the A and H file, they can only go to 4 squares, whereas on another square, knights can go to 8 squares. So now my opponent's knight went over here, and this is a really bad move, because in this position, I can just simply I can either go A3 or C3, and I can kick this knight away. I'm going to see which one of them I do. I think actually that I'm going to go ahead and go A3, and I'm going to kick this knight away, and I don't know where the knight is going to go. The knight is going to go back, so my opponent just lost one turn by going back and forth. I gained this move, but now I'm actually going to kick it out even more. Like I said, we want to take as much center as possible, so if you can push as long as your pawns are safe. Now my pawn is safe because the pawn is protected by the queen. So now this knight will have to move somewhere else. Where will the knight go? If the knight goes back, well, I just forced my opponent to, do a little dance with the knight, and now the knight is back in the starting position. My opponent just lost so many moves. So what I'll do now is that I want to develop the rest of my pieces. So I'll go with my bishop right over here, just because I want this bishop to be in an open diagonal, where there's no other pawns or pieces that are blocking it, because that's where bishops are the best. Now I will go ahead and castle. Castling is really, really, really important. Do that before you start doing any other crazy stuff. Keep your king safe, and after your king is safe, your other pieces can start doing their stuff. Now, my opponent went h5, and this is a really bad move, because my opponent right now is not developing at all, and their dream of the h-pawn pushing, it doesn't work, because it's going to take way too long. You cannot attack if you don't have your pieces out. So, I mean, you cannot attack with simply just one pawn. So we are now going to be attacking them. My opponent's leaving the king in the center, which is something that you should never do. So I'm going for a check. Now the bishop is going here, blocking the check, and I will simply attack this bishop again. Now, because this bishop is pinned by my rook, the bishop cannot capture mine, because then I would take the king. So now my opponent went f6, and f6, there's a little saying that goes never go f6. We can see now that after my opponent went with the pawn here and, with this pawn here, this square over here is super weak. So I have a light squared bishop in the prime position. I'm going to put my bishop over here. I'm checking my opponent's king, and now my opponent will never be able to castle, which is super awesome, because the king will be really unsafe if it doesn't castle. So we already have an advantage now that the king cannot castle. So I was actually provoking my opponent to play this move, because I really wanted them to play f6. Now, in this position, I will simply go back with my bishop. Let's see where I go. I will simply go back with my bishop here to f4. At first I was thinking about going here, but I actually want to put my bishop in a place where it can go to several diagonals. And bishops on the rim, well, they're a little bit green too, because there's only like these two diagonals it can go to. Here, there's a lot more places that it can go to. So let's see, c5. Okay, so I don't really understand why my opponent is not bringing their pieces out. They're right now in a big need to do so. But I'm not complaining, so I will just simply develop my knight. And now this knight, it still cannot go here. So I'm wondering where my opponent is going to put the knight. This is, a huge advantage right now for white. And we can see that this dream quickly ended. There wasn't anything going on. So, well, now that all my minor pieces are developed, which is what we want to start with, developing our minor pieces, so our knights and bishops, I can finally develop my queen. So I will choose to go with my queen over here because I'm actually threatening a checkmating too. So I'm just placing my queen in a place where I think that it'll be useful later on. And I think now the best move that my opponent has is to block everything with the knight here on e5, which, is fine if they do. I'll just have to exchange somehow and then we'll keep it going. So this pawn right now might become a little bit weak, but I don't really ever want to capture it because then my own king is going to become very unsafe. But we can see the difference between my king and my opponent's king is my king is right now behind 3 pawns and my opponent's king is super duper duper unsafe. Let's see if my opponent finds this blockade. It's typically it's really good to have your knights in the center, and yeah, my opponent didn't find it. Typically, it's really good to have your knights in the center, and especially, doing a move like this, which both improves your own knight, but also stops me from, going up in this diagonal, would have been amazing. But my opponent didn't find it, and I'm thinking now about, I want to go queen over here. I really want to do this move. But there might be knights here, which actually, I'm not so happy about the fact that I'm putting my queen in the same diagonal as my bishop, but because my opponent went b6, I feel like it indicates that they might want to, bring their bishop out this way. So I think that I'm going to wait a tiny little bit before I do this, and I'm going to go knight over here because I want to put a knight right over here. I want to bring more pieces towards my opponent's king, and maybe at some point I'm seeing this fork, the king and the rook, they're almost next to each other, so there's always this fork idea. So yeah, here we go. I thought that my opponent would move their bishop there, and now I can go queen over here. And now the queen is not in the same diagonal as the bishop. I wouldn't recommend you putting your queen in the same diagonal as the bishop or the same file as your opponent's rook, because there might be a lot of tactics that will make this very uncomfortable. So I never really recommend it. And now actually, guys, I'm not seeing any way for my opponent to stop the checkmate. If knight's here, then I'll be able to capture it. If queen here, I capture the queen. So I think we're checkmating the next move. Whoops. Do not pre-move once again. Oh my. I lose so many games by pre-moving. Please do not pre-move. But yeah, I'm just doing it right now to show you moves. But yeah, don't pre-move. So queen f7 is what I want to do right now. But yeah, I think that this is a pretty big theme in what I've seen in players in this rating group, that a lot of times they won't really like notice attacks. Like for instance, this attack going here and here is quite subtle, but it's fatal. I mean, I'm checkmating the next move. So yeah, it was really important to do this blockade before. I think that my opponent is right now just thinking, seeing if there's any way of stopping the checkmate, but like I said, I'm not seeing any way. So after this, I can simply capture, and now after capture is back, I will be able to go here. I guess my opponent can go knight h6, but I will be winning a full piece, which is fantastic. So this is definitely really good for me. I think my opponent is going to go knight h6, so I guess this was the only way of stopping it, which it was nice that they found, but a full piece is really good. I mean, should be just winning to be a full piece up. So we will see here. We will see here what they do. We can also see that my opponent went bishop b7, and this diagonal was actually not right for the bishop because my pawn was simply blocking the bishop. So the bishop had no future in this diagonal, which is also something that we always need to think about. Where exactly do our pieces thrive? Like, where is the best square in the position? What is the best diagonal? What is the best file? When it comes to rooks, what is the best file? When it comes to bishops, what is the best diagonal? When it comes to knights, what is the best square? We always need to keep those things in mind, because a lot in chess, yeah, there we go. It stopped there, but I'll just go back and now I'm threatening this. A lot in chess is about trying to find the best square for every single one of your pieces. If you're able to place your pieces in the best squares, Anna, stop doing this. If you're able to do that, then you will, moves will come naturally. Tactics will be there. Tactics will be there, you know? Like, things will just unfold so much more nicely, and it'll be a lot easier for you to come up with plans as well. In this game, I wasn't really able to show you a lot of middle game plans because it really quickly became a checkmate. I will capture simply with the knight so that my queen is in this exact same position. But in the next game, I'll try to show a lot more middle game plans. But I hope that this was still instructive in, how to come up with an attack. Why is it that I'm doing that? Okay, now my opponent is resigning. That's good. I had a few mini heart attacks here by dropping my piece to a wrong place. I don't really know why I was doing this. But anyways, guys, we won. There's nothing to do to stop the queen over here. I'll be capturing on h6, and then I will be checkmating, which will be super duper awesome. So there was nothing that my opponent could do. Biggest mistake that my opponent did, not blocking this. But also the opening, my opponent played really, really weirdly. We can see here what happens when we don't develop quickly and when we just, try to focus on one really, on one plan without developing. There's typically no attack if your pieces are not out. So now my opponent is going e4. I'm playing as the 500 player. Goal for this game, no pre-moves, Hannah. I actually kind of want to deactivate pre-moves, but do not do it though. If you're playing a lot of blitz, please have your pre-moves activated. But okay, so knight over here, I'll bring my knight out. I'm actually typically a Sicilian kind of girl, but I'm playing this because I don't think that the Sicilian is a good opening if you're under 800 rated. I think that it's a really complex opening that you definitely want to be higher rated for. So once again, we're bringing our pieces out. Pawns first, knights, bishops, castles, and then queens and rooks. Simple formula, guys. Simple formula. So we have right now a Ruy Lopez, so I will just simply go d6 to defend my pawn. And then after this, I'll bring my knights out, and then I'll castle. I'm just going d6 because, there's a lot of theory here, but, the idea of this is just defending the pawn. If the bishop ever takes over here, then my pawn is defended. I know that there's a lot of things that you can do, but for the simplicity of it, I'm just going to do this move over here. So we'll see now what my opponent chooses to do. A lot of times you try to go d4, I believe, in these sort of positions. Okay, my opponent is taking first on c6, which makes sense to destroy my pawn structure. Now my pawns are doubled, which is not, amazing. And now my opponent is going d4. So I will go ahead and I think I'm actually going to do a move. Let's see. I'm trying to think. I actually think that I'm going to do this move over here because I'm pinning the knight. And now this knight cannot really work. So now if captures, I can first capture the knight and then I can just simply capture it back and my pawn will not be be taken back. So I can simply capture over here. If I took back here immediately, then there might, actually, you know what? I'm going to capture here immediately. I just realized if queen takes, rook takes, and knight takes over here, there is a checkmate. So I'm just going to do like this, actually. Just because I don't really want to exchange the bishop for this knight if I don't have to, as then the queen would be able to capture back, and I wouldn't even destroy my opponent's pawn structure. Okay. My opponent fell for the checkmate! My opponent fell for the checkmate! Oh no! Yeah, here we go. Tactics, always really important to think about. And if you're taking material and if you're doing these sort of moves before you've castled, always look out for tactics because otherwise these things can happen. Okay, guys, this is so short that I'm going to give you one more game because I really want to talk about, middle games, and I feel like, both games have ended too quickly. So e4, I'm going to go e5 again. Once again, pawns up in the center, knights out, defending. Let's see what my opponent opts for. Okay, my opponent is going for the same move as before, so I will go d6, simply. Wow, we're seeing the exact same game. Okay, I will capture back. We are seeing the exact same game. I'm going to go bishop g4. There's no way that my opponent will do the same thing, right? There's no way my opponent will fall for the same trick. I think I just found the way of winning at 500 in chess. I literally won 2 games in a row with the exact same trick. Guys, I literally figured out the way to winning. Please try this out and let me know in the comments down below if you guys can win using this. This is actually insane. Okay, guys, I need to go for one more game. Like, these games are finishing so quickly. Guys, I hope that you all remember this checkmate now. Okay, I'm getting the white pieces. Okay, let's do this. So, I'm going to go e4 now. I'll play a different opening. e4, e5. I'm going to bring my knight out. And once again, we're doing the same thing. We're bringing pawns to the center, and then we're bringing our knights out, just like before. Now we cannot get the same thing as what happened before. So now my opponent is going queen e7, and this is a big mistake because the queen is now blocking this bishop, and now it's going to be really hard for my opponent to develop and get their pieces out. So this is a big mistake. I'm just going to bring my knight out. I'm going to be happy, but like I said, guys, pawns, knights, bishops, castle, and then queen and rooks. Do not go with your queen and rooks before. I'm not really going to care about what my opponent is doing. I'm just going to bring my bishops out, develop, and I'm going to be really happy. This queen is right now blocking my opponent's bishop, so my opponent can castle, and I can only say thank you. I'm happy. So now my plan will be to go d3 and bishop g5 because I might want to put up a knight right over here. I always love pinning my opponent's knights because when I'm able to do so, there's always, a little bit more tactics. Now my opponent's knight cannot move because I will be able to capture the queen. So I'll bring up my knight. This is always good to do when you're pinning. I'll bring up my knight because, now I'm also threatening to take on c7. I'm threatening the queen. And if the queen goes up over here, there is this royal fork, which would be amazing. Do not fall for it. Do not fall for it. Like I said, never put queens in the same diagonal as your opponent's bishop, and always look out for forks, especially when your opponent's knight is entering, your side of the board, which I would call this part, right? So I would say 5 to 8 is black side of the board, 1 to 4 is white side of the board. Okay, good. My opponent went up over here. Okay, so before anything else, I will go ahead and simply castle. And now my opponent should probably kick away my knight. But if my opponent kicks away my knight, I'll simply take this. And I will start trying to get as much center as possible. So far, so good. My opponent went h6, so we're going to go bishop h4. I don't want to take over here because then I'll make the life of my opponent a lot easier by exchanging everything. No, we want to keep the tension. We want to keep the tension, which means that I want to make sure that my opponent still cannot move the knight, still want to pin. So this is another common mistake that I see a lot of beginners doing, moving up the pawns in front of the king. So unless this king is going to castle this side, this is a terrible maneuver at this rating. And actually in general, typically. Okay, the idea was, of course, that, my opponent didn't want my bishop to pin the knight. And I've seen actually this, I've seen a lot of people doing this because they think that pins are so annoying, which is also another reason for doing pins at this rating range. But this is really bad because when the king castles this way, the king is going to be really vulnerable. So we need to think 2 steps ahead, and we need to think that this king has to castle at some point. If the king stays here, it's going to be super unsafe. And if the king castles, then once again, super unsafe because of these pawns being up so much and not protecting it. So now my bishop is under attack. I'll go back with it. And I think at some point they're going to want to go h5 and h4 to trap my bishop. But I'm going to go h3 pretty soon. Oh, now the queen went back. So I actually think that my opponent wants to castle this way. And okay. What I'm going going to do is that I'm just going to try to get my center. Typically, they say that, the best way of counterattacking is to attacking yourself. So I'm just going to go ahead and push as much as I can over here. Now, if takes and takes, I'm giving up this pawn, but the idea is simply that one, this pawn is also going to be under attack, but two, I can go ahead and bring up some more pieces. So I'll be able to go rook e1 and attack the queen, which I think should be fine. So I'll go ahead and capture back with the queen over here because I don't want to destroy my pawn structure. I want my pawns in front of the king to be nice and safe like this. And now if takes and takes, well, I'll have a fantastic center. So knight f6. Okay, so here I believe I'm winning a pawn. I've talked about this in previous videos. Always look at checks, captures, and attacks. First thing that came to mind was, well, checks, but then captures. And I'm right now analyzing what happens if I capture this pawn in the center. And I saw that after pawn takes and pawn takes, I will have this check over here, and I'll be threatening this pawn with 2 pieces. So that is what I'm going to do. We can also see the issue that this bishop is not developed yet, so the rooks are not connected, which actually makes this king a little bit more unsafe too. So queen f5, check. Let's see where the king goes. The king probably has to go somewhere over here. If the knight goes back, yeah, then I was going to perhaps capture an f7, but now this was even worse. And this is a moment where my opponent really should have taken some of their time to think, because now I have bishop takes e5 check, and I'm checking the king, but at the same time, I am right now threatening this knight with 2 pieces, the bishop and my queen. But not only that, after this, I'm threatening the queen and the rook, and all of my opponent's pieces are falling apart. And all of this, well, it started with my opponent not developing, but then it came down to me just calculating a little bit of tactics, following my method of checks, captures, and attacks, which I've talked about in another video. And now my opponent even gave up the queen. This is really going down for my opponent. So I actually feel kind of bad. But yeah, now this is really going down for my opponent. My queen was under attack. So before I do my own sort of threats or whatever, I realize, what is my opponent threatening? My opponent was threatening my queen over here. So I take this back. So I'll now be able to capture the other rook. And now all of my opponent's pieces are pretty much gone. Okay, so my bishop is under attack. I'll go ahead and put it back over here. Now that I'm up so much material, what I really want to do is that I want to exchange as many pieces as possible. So we'll take and take, and then I'll go ahead and, yeah, we'll just go ahead and bring this up. So this and this. But I hope that this was instructional for you in the sense of trying to figure out, what I've been trying to do. And what it is that my opponent has done wrong. So, I mean, I'm even going to promote this other pawn. After king here, I can go check. And after king moves, I can bring my queen up. Here, I can even do this. I'm simply just, the rook can capture my queen, but then I'll be making a queen. I just want to exchange all of my opponent's pieces, because they're not going to have any other pieces to play with. So I'm going to now bring in my rooks, and it's time to checkmate. So got to make sure here that there's no sort of stalemate, but because my opponent has so many pawns, there's no risk for it. So I'm just going to try to cut or take away as many squares for my opponent's king as possible. So here I will just go with the check. If the king goes here, then there's a checkmate, and if the king goes here, then I have check. And if the king goes there, well, okay, here I will just simply bring in my next rook. Cannot capture it because it's a pin. And I'm just going to bring in now all of my pieces. I have a queen and 2 rooks. It's amazing. That's what we're doing. And there's no risk for any stalemate. And actually in this position, my opponent disconnected, which probably means that, they left the game because they tilted or whatever, which a lot of people do, which I think is kind of bad. Like, just resign. Oh, now they abandoned. There we go. All right, everybody. So these are some of the tricks that I do, and some of the ways that my opponents at this rating range have gone wrong. I hope that you guys learn something from this video, and especially please do not fall for that rook checkmate I did in games 2 and 3. Like, guys, that was absolutely insane. That was absolutely crazy. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching this video. Let me know in the comments down below if you want me to do this sort of videos with different rating groups, 1,000 rating, 1,000, 1,500, etc., etc. Have a really wonderful day. I'll see you all in the next video.